So today we're going to be working on the Nashville number system. Now, we're saying Nashville number system, but technically speaking, what we're focusing on is not truly the Nashville number system. There's a couple different, inconsistencies with how people label these sort of things. So we're going to be working on what I've used the most throughout my schooling and what I still use to this day. And I'll talk about how that is a little bit different than the Nashville number system. And also it's a little bit more comprehensive than the Nashville number system. But basically the point to all of this is to be able to relay information very quickly and efficiently when you're playing with other musicians. If you've ever been at a jam or something like that, you might notice somebody say, hey, what are the chords to the song? And, we could say, oh, C, F, G, or whatever else, right? And that works great. But as soon as you start playing with musicians when they're trying to switch keys to adapt to vocalists or for other instruments or whatever else, then you have to be able to think a little bit more quickly on your toes to know which chords work in different keys. And that's where this Nashville number system comes into play, is it gives you a way to actually communicate a progression agnostically without being able to tell you which key is being played immediately. So if I say that C, F, and G, well, you might have heard that called a 1-4-5 before. And instead of saying C, F, and G, we may just say 1, 4, and 5, and then whatever key we're playing in. So to start this, what we want to do is we want to start thinking about a key to kind of equate everything to. So let's start in the key of C major, the people's key. No sharps or flats. So if you've never looked at any sort of music theory before, the key of C major is really great because it has no sharps or flats, and one of each of the 7 notes in the musical alphabet are represented. So I'm going to go ahead and write that here. So we have C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And it looks something like this, right? No problem there. Oops, so I pull open all my notes. No problem there, right? So those are the notes that are in the key of C major. Now, every single major key, or minor key for that matter, that we play in is going to have 7 unique notes, right? In this case, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, then kind of restarts with the letter C. Now, with this, these notes have chords that can be played along with them that sound good. And this is how we know what key we're in. And the way that we can know what works, well, the first chord, the C, is going to be a C major chord. And so what we can do here is we can just write C and leave it as it is. Because when there's a note listed as a chord with nothing next to it, it's implied to be a major chord. The next one though, the D, a D major chord doesn't work in C major. D major chord actually has an F sharp note in it. It's not too important to worry about why or what or anything like that right now. Just know that D major chord doesn't exist in the key of C, but rather a D minor chord does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write D, M. That little M means minor, right? So if I'm playing in the key of C major, I can use a C major chord or a D minor chord. And I'm just going to kind of go through the rest of these. The next one is an E minor. The next one after that is F major, then G major, then A minor, and then B diminished. Oof, fancy, right? But this right here is telling you which chords can actually be played in the key of C, which is really neat. Because if you're jamming out in C, maybe you're writing a song, maybe you're trying to figure out a song in a key, odds are good these are the basic chords that are going to be used in that key. It's kind of neat. So I'm going to play a little bit right now. So I'm going to just play C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, back to C. And you can hear they all sound good. They all sound correct. If I played like an E major chord in there, that came from nowhere, right? And that's why we make sure that we use these quality of the chords. We make sure that it has a major chord for the first one, then minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. And you can see what I said there lines up with this. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So now here is where some of the concepts of the Nashville number system can come into play. To an extent, we're going to start with Roman numerals, which is technically a little bit different than Nashville number system, but I see them mentioned as one and the same all the time. So we're going to use Roman numerals to give us information on chord progressions. And we're going to use capital Roman numerals to signify major, and we're going to use lowercase Roman numerals to signify minor. And I'm going to base the number off the position on the scale for right now. So C is 1 because we're doing C major to start, right? So I'm going to make an uppercase Roman numeral 1 right under my C. Looks something like that. Now underneath the D minor, well, D minor is 2, C, D, right? I'm going to do a Roman numeral 2. But am I going to do a uppercase Roman numeral 2 or lowercase? Well, it's a D minor chord. So I'm going to put it as a lowercase 2. Looks something like this. And then the E minor is the 3, another minor. So I'm going to do another lowercase. The F is the 4, major. So I'm going to do uppercase. The 5 is major. So I'm going to do uppercase. The 6 is minor. So I'm going to do lowercase. And then the 7 is diminished. Now this one gets a little messy. We're going to do a lowercase because it starts with a minor third. And then we're going to add this diminished symbol at the end of it to make it a diminished. If that's confusing to you, don't even worry about it. The odds that you play this 7 diminished are pretty slim compared to the others, so don't worry too much. But you can see now we have these Roman numerals that are associated with this. Now that's pretty cool, right? Well, these Roman numerals start to give you an idea of what a progression can really be. So let's take an example of this. Let's say that I want to play a chord progression that goes maybe C, F, and G. Well, that's super basic, right? As basic as it gets. And you might have heard somebody say in the past, that's a 1, 4, 5. Well, now you know why. C is the 1, F is the 4, and G is the 5. 1, 4, 5. Doesn't get much simpler than that. What if you're playing a chord progression that maybe goes C to A minor to D minor to G? Well, if we look at this little system, C is the 1 chord, right? And then A minor is the 6 chord, D minor is the 2 chord, and G is the 5 chord. So it's a 1, 6, 2, 5. It's a lot of numbers very quickly, but you might have heard that phrase before. 1, 6, 2, 5 is very popular for a lot of like 1950s ballads and things like that. If you listen to that sort of sound. See? Instant 50s sound, right? So now, what's the point to this? Why would we learn these numbers if we're just going to say C, A minor, D minor, and G anyways? And the trick is when we start to switch keys. When we start to play in other keys, we can utilize these numbers to communicate what chords should be played. This is where it ties back to the circle of fifths and fourths. Now, the circle of fifths and fourths is not really, they're not the same thing with the Nashville number system. They rather stand adjacent to another and can help strengthen one another in terms of the understanding. So if you know nothing about the circle of fifths, that's fine. You don't have to worry about that. But if you do know the circle of fifths, you know that the circle of fifths can help tell you which notes should be played in which keys. So for instance, let's switch to the key of G. Everything we just did so far here was the key of C, right? Now let's do the key of G and look at the same sort of exercise. Well, the first note in the key of G is pretty obvious. It's a G, right? Key of G, we got a G. Well, what's the second note in G? Well, this is where some music theory knowledge is required, right? So you can know it by the recipe of the scale, the whole, whole, half, whole, half. If you know that, that's a way to solve it. You can look at the circle of fifths and see it's 1 to the left, which is the 1 sharp. If you know none of these, Google is one of your best friends. You can go on Google and type in, what are the notes of G major? And what it will pop up is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, back to G. Doesn't matter how you arrive at that for today's lesson. Today's lesson is about trying to figure out chord progressions, not trying to memorize every single scale. It's okay to use Google. There's nothing wrong with that. But knowing that now, G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp, that's going to create the key of G major. All right. Now, here's what's so cool about this. Is without me writing anything else, I can actually just line up this number 1 and this 2 and this 3 and so on and so forth with the key of G major. So a 1, 4, 5 in the key of C major was C, F, and G. A 1, 4, 5 in the key of G major, however, well, that's going to be G, 4, C, 5, D. Isn't that cool? You now know how to play these different chord progressions by just looking at this. So we did another one a moment ago, which is 1-6-2-5, right? So that 1-6-2-5, 1 is G, 6 is, well, we go to 6, E minor, 2 is A minor, and 5 is D major. Now, to kind of show this, I'm going to play that progression in C again. Sounds like this. Right? Has that certain sound. What if I want to get that same sound in the key of G because somebody wants to sing in G, or because this instrument wants to play in G, or whatever the reason might be, I want to play it in G? Well, I look at those same intervals. I look at 1, 6, 2, and 5, and I play G, E minor, A minor, and D. You hear how it's the same but different, right? That's what's so spicy and interesting about this, is when you play a chord progression like this, it's going to be the same, but because of the ukulele and the tuning of the ukulele, it might sound just a little bit different because of the way that the notes are sort of outlined. But this is one of the most powerful tools you can ever have at your disposal, because it allows you to be able to say, hey, I know this chord progression in this key. What are those numbers? And how can I then take those numbers and relate them elsewhere? Now, for the Nashville number system concept, we end up kind of dropping the Roman numerals a bit. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. But I just wanted to clarify, technically for Nashville number system, the chord quality, meaning if it's major or minor or diminished, ends up being implied. And that's why I'm not as big of a fan of it. It actually requires more music theory knowledge to be able to utilize. So I think the Roman numerals are much better to start with for this reason. It gives you more information. But using these, we can look at a couple examples, right? If we look at an example, for instance, of a 1-4-5, which we just did a moment ago, the 1-4-5 in C would be C, F, and G, and a 1-4-5 in G would be G, C, and D. Another example that I really like is doing a 1-6-2-5, one of my favorite chord progressions, and that's going to be C, A minor, D minor, G in the key of C. That's going to be G, E minor, A minor, D in the key of G. Whew, that's a lot, right? So that looks something like this. Now, this might look like a math assignment, but if you see, we can make do, right? The key of C, for instance, we have those chords and then those Nashville number systems, and then we can see with these and go on from there, right? And so I see a question right now from Connie saying, how do you know that a chord in a key is major, minor, or diminished? Based on its positioning. The first chord, second chord, third chord, fourth chord, fifth chord, sixth chord, and seventh chord always have that sort of quality in a major key when you're following these rules. Now, you can break rules, and that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that rules are meant to be broken. But when we're following the rules, which is sort of what we're doing here, you can know that it's always going to be 1 is a major chord, 2 is a minor, 3 is a minor, 4 is a major, 5 is a major, 6 is a major, and 7 is a diminished. So it doesn't matter what key you're working in. If you're in the key of C major, C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished. If you're in the key of G major, G, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished. If you're in the key of, let's say, B flat major, now you're going to be B flat major is your 1, your 2 is C minor, 3 is D minor, 4 is E flat major, 5 is F major, 6 is G minor, 7 is A diminished. It's always going to be that same major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished format in major. And that makes it really nice because you can start to see what to do. So Zill says, when composing, is it common to take 1-4-5 in one key, then same in another key? So it's common if you want to change keys mid-song. So when you're composing a song, usually you want to stick in one key because that makes it sound a little bit more safe. And in the event you want to stick in one key, that's where this thing becomes so magical. It's like, oh, I'll try some different pieces here, right? They all work. And then if you're saying, hey, my song's kind of boring, I want to liven it up, maybe you switch keys for the bridge or the verse or something. A lot of songs do that. And it can sound really cool, and it can sound really almost wrong, but that's what makes it so cool, right? Music has no rules that aren't meant to be broken. Music has lots of rules, but they're all meant to be broken, and that's what makes it interesting. And so Connie says, light bulb moment, I assume for the major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, which is awesome because I still remember the day I was sitting in music theory class and that moment happened for me. And it was one of the coolest, most exciting things because it was like, oh, that's it. We know it, right? Now, when we're looking at this, this is just in major. We're talking about just for major today to make it, nice and distilled down. But the Nashville number system ends up trying to make this even more shorthanded. So if we know that the first chord is always major, the second chord's always minor, third chord's always minor, fourth chord's always major, fifth chord's always major, sixth chord's always minor, and seventh chord's always diminished in a major scale, then if I just write the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 as, simple numbers, no Roman numeral business here, then you should know what the chord quality is based on memorizing that. So the 1 chord is major, the 2 chord is minor, the 3 chord is minor, 4 chord is major, 5 chord is major, 3 chords minor, I said that, right? Already getting lost. 4 chord is major, 5 chord is major, 6 chord is minor, 7 is diminished, following that same sort of pattern that's listed up top. So with the Nashville number system, they oftentimes will just write the number like this. But in addition to that, they also sometimes will use little symbols to describe a chord's characteristic. So to this point, we've only worked on our basic chords, what we call triads or 3-note chords. And the only types of 3-note chords that exist naturally in a scale here are major, minor, and diminished chords. Those are the 3 types that naturally occur within a scale. As soon as you start adding a 7th, however, you introduce more chord types. You have now major 7 chords, minor 7 chords. You also have what's called a dominant 7 chord, also known as just 7, like G7. It's actually called G dominant 7. G major 7 is different, right? But you get these different terms as you extend the chords. And the Nashville number system has symbols to mark these and to show what they should be. So we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of working through this so that you can see how these different chords can look. So the first thing that we want to look at is just these numbers and how they can relate. So if I want to do a 1, 6, 2, 5 progression in something, I go 1, 6, 2, 5, and I follow the same format as these Roman numeral numbers up here, right? So a 1, 6, 2, 5 is a major chord, a minor chord, a minor chord, and a major chord, even though that's not listed here with these numbers, right? So now if I were to add to these numbers and make them into 7th chords, what I end up with looks something like this. So give me just one moment to write them. I'm writing them with now their extensions listed as well, which is pretty cool. Starts to look like some sort of, I don't know, organic chemistry. I don't know. I haven't taken a science class since high school, but looks something like this. Almost there. All right. Look at these suckers. So these are now the 7th versions that are taking place with it. And there are some symbols that take place. You'll notice that it says 1, and then you see the triangle 7. Well, the triangle listed there actually means major. So when you see triangle 7, which you may have seen before somewhere, sometime, that means a major 7 chord, right? So triangle 7, major 7. The little minus sign that's listed here, that's a minor. So minor 7. You see that's used twice, right? This triangle 7, hey, we already know that. That's major 7. And then we have this just 7. Well, that's the one that I mentioned before, dominant 7. You might sometimes see it listed as DOM 7. Don't worry about that dominant word right now. If you're a big music theory buff, you might know that dominant means 5, and that's why it's in this position. Don't worry about that if you don't know it, though. Just the number 7 by itself implies a 7 chord, a dominant 7 chord, which is the most common type of 7 that you play on the ukulele. G7, C7, D7. These are all dominant 7 chords with it. And then we have our minor 7 again for 6 minus 7, minor. And then my favorite one, 7 diminished with a line through it, 7. Well, that means 7 half diminished 7. Wow, right? The line through it signifies half diminished. In the event that you just have a circle, that means full diminished. And when you're doing a 7, you do half diminished in the case of major. Gosh, there's a lot of information, right? The important thing to glean from this is not that you need to memorize all of these things at once, but rather start to latch on to little pieces. So if you're completely overwhelmed right now, that's normal. That's how we all feel when we're learning this stuff. What you want to do is focus on 1 or 2 pieces that you can capture. So maybe that all that is, hey, I can do a 1, 4, 5, and C. I can figure out what those notes are, C, F, and G. And then, hey, I can do a 1, 4, 5, and G using the same logic, write out G, G, C, and D. If that's all you can do, that's fantastic. that's something that's so important to your development as a musician because it builds upon itself. You can continue to take it further. So with this, I'm going to write out this a little bit of a legend here so that you can know what these symbols are. So the triangle is major. The minus symbol is minor. The little circle degrees symbol is diminished. The circle with a line through it is half diminished. Half diminished. And then one that we haven't talked about here is a plus sign, and that is augmented. Now, why haven't we talked about augmented at all? Well, augmented chords don't naturally occur in a major scale. An augmented chord contains intervals that don't exist in our traditional major scales. So does that mean the chord doesn't exist? No, it totally does. It sounds great. Really cool chord. One of my favorites. Right? But you hear how it sounds wrong? All right. The reason is because it is. It's breaking the rules. And we're kind of trying to follow the rules a little bit here. So this is a lot, again, this is a lot of information, right? But it's something that you can start to just look at to figure out how these things relate to one another. The most important thing that you can do is start to look at where these numbers coincide and how you can figure it out with different keys based on it. If that's, again, all that you do, that's fantastic if you haven't done it before, right? So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to start posting them now. I'm going to be answering them as we go through here. But one of the questions, Brie asked, where'd that half diminished come from? So I'm going to go a little bit deep into the theory here. A diminished chord is a 1, 3, and 5 where the 3 and the 5 are both flatted. The relationship between the 1 and the 3 is a minor third. The relationship from the 3 to the 5 is another minor third. Those two minor thirds in a row exist in a major scale off the 7th chord. So if you look at the key of C and you're doing a B diminished chord, B to D, minor third, which is 1.5 steps. So you can see 3 frets, right? And then D to F is also 3 frets. So a B diminished chord is in the key of C major because the notes B, D, and F all are in C major. But what's the next note after F going up a third? F, G, A. That right there is in C major, right? A flat is not in the key of C major, right? It's A natural. So B, D, F, A is what exists in C major. And if you play those notes, B, F, D, and A, you get a B half diminished chord. A B full diminished chord has an A flat in it. That does not exist in C major. Now, you can still play B diminished, and you can still use that, but it doesn't exist naturally in the scale. So the half diminished chord is a product of the key that you're playing in. And the 7th chord interval, when you add a 7, will always be a half diminished chord in major. And so that's where it comes from. It sounds very confusing, but all that it is following the rules. We can't have an A flat in the key of C, and that's why, right? So not to say this chord isn't awesome and can be used, but that's what's going on with that. So Pcash says, so 1 is never a minor 7. So not true. In minor, 1 is a minor 7, right? And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But right now, what we're doing is just major keys. Just to start, just as we're getting comfortable with this. Again, this is like a quarter worth of music theory distilled into 25 minutes. So this is a lot of information. But this is just major keys, not minor keys. In a minor key, the 1 absolutely can be a 1 minor 7. And everything sort of changes to an extent. And I'll show you what that means in just a moment. Zill says, I keep trying to learn this stuff, but most of me just want to learn where to put my fingers. It's also overwhelming. I completely hear you. And guess what? That's okay. It's okay if this theory stuff is stressful and you don't enjoy it and you don't want to do it. Spend your time playing. That's fine. You will come to a point, or you won't come to a point with your playing where you will need to utilize this information. And when you need to use it, you're going to be more excited to learn it because you need it. For me, when I was studying music, I was just so enthralled with it all. I was excited to learn the theory. But the reality is the actual amount that I use, like the Nashville number system, for instance, I use it when I'm teaching private lessons and somebody asks me to switch a song to a different key because they're not comfortable singing in it. Right? That's about it for when I actually use this. Now, if I were a touring, gigging musician or a studio musician or somebody who played, with other people a lot, I would use this all the time. Now, I'm very glad that I know it and that I'm proficient at using it, but at the same time, if I had to start having aspects of music leave my brain, this would be one of the earlier ones just because it's something I don't use as much personally. It's not that it's not used as much in general, it's just everybody has different sort of needs. So if you're a solo player who's just trying to work on solo instrumentals and you're reading tabs and playing them through and you look at this and it's overwhelming, maybe try to get just a couple little things from it, things that you didn't know before, and then move on. It's okay. You can always come back to it. No problem at all. And so I know that feeling of it being very discouraging. So Zill also says, do you memorize the numbers for every single key? And so remember, the numbers are agnostic, so to speak, right? In a major key, it's always going to go 1 major, 2 minor, 2 minor, or 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 major, 6 minor, 7 diminished. It's always that same major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished in every key. So if you memorize that, and then you memorize keys, or at least can figure out keys somewhat quickly, even if that's pulling out your smartphone and typing in what notes are in the key of F sharp major, then you're going to be able to figure out what those chord qualities are very quickly. Connie says, how's this different than the circle of fifths? Is circle of fifths not used in the same way? So circle of fifths is much slower to start to solve some of these problems because you're going to have to look at the whole circle. The nice thing about the Nashville number system is if you know what notes are in a key, which the circle of fifths can help you find, it's very quick to start look at what chords exist in that key and how those chords can be translated to another key. So if you know the key of C major and F major really well, then utilizing this, knowing these numbers, you can switch chord progressions really easily. If somebody's sitting there and playing a chord progression and it's going, 1, 6, 2, 5, for instance, I can switch that to any key as long as I know the other notes in that key. So in F, 1 is F. What would 6 be? Well, we go F, G, A, B flat, C, D, D minor. 2, F, G minor. 5, F, G, A, B flat, C. And there we go. I have it now, right? Pretty cool, right? And so that's where it's very different than the circle of fifths, is it's really more applicational in jam settings, right? It has more of a jam context. And while these things are similar, the circle of fifths and the Nashville number system, you want to think of like the circle of fifths as its own thing, and the Nashville number system is almost like an extension on top of it. You don't necessarily need to have this completely understood to use this, but this is a product of this. The Nashville number system wouldn't really exist without the circle of fifths kind of giving us a Rosetta Stone to understand how to decipher everything. So if you don't know anything about the circle of fifths and you're watching this as a recording, be sure and check out the link below to the previous live lesson where we covered the circle of fifths, because that can certainly help with this. But again, I've got some students who know the circle of fifths really well, never use the Nashville number system ever, and then vice versa. Ones that are gigging and playing with other people, they tend to not care too much about the circle of fifths. They memorize the keys that they're going to play in. They know the Nashville number system, and they can say, hey, what's the chord progression? Oh, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Okay, I know 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 in whatever key I need to based on that, right? So now, if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, that's normal. This is a lot of information and not something that is just going to unlock like that. I studied music for years in college and applied it with the uke, and it took a long time before I got really comfortable with this, and now I've been teaching it for over 10 years. And so when I say all of these things really quickly, it can become like, oh my God, well, that's normal to feel that sort of like stress and anxiety with it. Again, the best way you can learn this stuff is try to latch onto something, just something, even if all that you understand is that, oh, the 1 chord is always major and major. Boom, if you didn't know that before, that makes you that much more of a dangerous musician with it. So just sort of take that information. Now, one more thing that I want to talk about as sort of a little bit of an extra credit thing is minor. So using like the circle of fifths and fourths, we can figure out that relative minor nonsense. Well, the relative minor is going to be the 6th degree of the major, right? So if we take this same thing here, in fact, I'm going to copy and paste. Thank God for iPads, by the way. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it down here, create a new part. So this is it in major. right? The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 goes something like that, right? So major. Now, if we want to do this in minor, well, it's actually really simple because all that we do is we find the sixth scale degree, which is right here, right? And we make that into our new 1. Now, the 1 in minor is going to be a minor chord, right? Instead of being the number 6, though, we change it to the number 1. So if you're playing in a minor key, your 1 chord is a minor. Minor keys and major keys are different, right? And then what happens is we follow the same path. So the 1 is minor. The second chord is going to be diminished, right? Because we're following the same thing. We're just making that into 1. So 2 is 2 diminished. The 3 is, hey, major. The 4 is minor. The 5 is minor. The 6 is major. And the 7 is major. And so you can see the reason this works is because this becomes our new 1. And it's all the same. See, 1 here is the same as 6 here. The diminished 7 here is the same as diminished 2. 1 is the same as 3. 2 is the same as 4. 3 is the same as 5. So on and so forth as we go through. Okay, cool. 4 is the same as 6, and 5 is the same as 7. So that's how you can do this in minor. So now you can say the same sort of thing. You can be like, oh, I'm going to play a 1, 7, 2, 5 in minor, right? And that would be now with these. So everything is the same. The pattern is the same. It's just starting at a different point. And that's what's kind of neat about it. Now, does this always follow the rule? No, minor all the time likes to break the rules. In fact, we've got whole scales that break the rules, like harmonic minor, for instance. We're not going to go into that today. But just know that a lot of times these rules will be sort of broken. And if you understand this system, you can understand how to break the system too. For instance, on the minor, the 5 is a minor chord, right? Well, what if you instead play a 5 like this? Well, that breaks the rules. Now I'm playing a major 5 instead of a minor 5. But guess what? It sounds really cool. And it's used in songs all over the place. Miserlou, Body Surfing, these minor songs that have that tension. If I'm in A minor is my 1 chord. My 5 chord should be A, B, C, D, E, should be E minor, right? Well, what if I play E major instead? Well, that sounds something like this, right? Actually sounds really cool. E minor sounds different, right? So it's breaking rules, right? And that's the reason I'm bringing this up isn't because it's just random. It's a common rule that's broken. A lot of times that we hear minor music, we end up using a major 5 because it borrows it from the minor or from the major, and it sounds good. Again, it sounds so confusing and so easy to get lost. But as you look at these things, it can really start to be cool to understand how this all works. So any questions with this monstrosity that is the Nashville number system? Now this PDF is going to be available on Rock Class 101 for download for all members. So check, if you're watching this as a recording, check for this PDF to be uploaded. But are there any other questions? I'm going to start going through the chat, make sure I didn't miss anything. I also did have a question on Rock Class 101 forum. Kelly writes, hi, Matt. I'm glad you're introducing the Nashville number system. I started with it and made quick key transpositions easy. Here are some questions for you. What's the difference between the Nashville number system and the circle of fifths? What are its strengths and disadvantages? So again, circle of fifths, this is kind of an extension to the circle of fifths. So it uses a lot of the same concepts, but at the same time, it's built upon an understanding of the circle of fifths and fourths in a lot of ways. So they are different, but extensions of one another. The more important thing is, what are its strengths and disadvantages? Nashville number system is much more adept at quickly giving you an answer. When you look at, okay, I'm playing this chord progression in C and now I want to play this chord progression in F sharp, you have to do a lot of kind of analyzing with the circle to figure out where the chord positions and everything else are. With this Nashville number system, if you know the notes in C major and you know the notes in F sharp major, you know what that chord progression is going to look like going between these two. And that's really potent and powerful, is the quickness that you can derive this from. The weakness to the Nashville number system is it's not as comprehensive. It doesn't show you everything and explain everything why. That's why a lot of people love it and why a lot of people hate it. People that tend to not need to understand how everything works loves it because it just shows them what they need to know. People that hate it tend to be the ones that need to know how everything works. And until they understand the circle of fifths, they don't even want to look at the Nashville number system. Beth also says how to find minor keys on the Nashville number system. So so the minor chords are going to be found there, and then as we just talked about with the minor scale, how you can figure out how to play in a minor key. And then how to find the relative minor in a key using Nashville number system. It's always going to be the sixth interval of the major, no matter what key you're in. So that's pretty cool. So another question here is Pcash says, are there symbols for add and sus chords? Yes, they are literally the three letters of add, ADD, or sus, SUS. That's all that's going to be added. To my knowledge, to what I've seen, there could be some deep dive symbolage that exists that I'm not aware of. But whenever I've seen that sort of thing, I just see add 9 or add 6 or sus 4, sus 2. Just sus usually means sus 4 too. If you just see SUS, it implies a sus 4. But those are the symbols that are usually used. Zill says, would it be helpful to take a song and analyze it with the numbers, or are there so many exceptions I'll just get confused? No, absolutely do it. And if there starts to be an exception, you probably can find it. So let me give a reference here. Let's say that my song goes C, E major, A minor, G, right? And so that's probably in the key of C, right? It's a nice progression, but you can hear how it sounds like it's kind of breaking the rules, right? Well, let's figure out what the numbers are here. So the first one is C, right? The next one, so C major, right? That's a 1. The next one is E major. Now C, D, E is major, but E should be E minor, shouldn't it? So it's a lowercase 3. So what I can do is I can do an uppercase 3 instead. And now I've got an uppercase 1 and an uppercase 3. Now, is that uppercase 3 correct? No, but we know what it is, right? Then I go to A minor, that's a lowercase 6, and then G, uppercase 5. Now I'm going to switch it in the key of G major. G is the 1. Now I need an uppercase 3. So what's the 3 of G? Well, we see it's B. So instead of playing B minor, I'm going to play B major because it was an uppercase 3. And that might sound like this. And then the 6 is E minor, and then the 5 is D, right? You can hear see how similar it sounds to when I played it in C. Pretty cool, right? So I glazed over that pretty quickly, but I think that can start to help you understand how these numbers can correlate. When you break a rule in one key, that rule stays broken in the exact same way for whatever the next key is. If you're doing the 3 as a major in one key, you're just going to do the 3 as a major in that other key, and it'll work. Pretty cool. Bree says, questionless because overwhelmed, but great takeaway, capital and lowercase Roman numerals to know if it's a major or minor chord. Perfect. Yes. Again, this is a pretty advanced concept, and I tried to start it in a way where everybody could start getting something. And as we go off the deep end, it is absolutely off the deep end. There's a lot of concepts and content here. Again, this is not my first choice to do for a quick 45-minute live lesson on a Saturday morning from the standpoint of being comprehensive. This is something that takes quite a bit more work. And so as you're learning music theory, if this is something you're really interested in and this video was overwhelming, just return to it periodically, because I guarantee you will learn other things, and then something I'll say will open up that part for you a little bit more. When I was learning music theory in college, I was taking literally like 20 credits a quarter on music. I was taking music theory. I was taking jazz workshop. I was taking jazz and pop harmony. I was taking digital music. I was taking composition. I was taking music for the listener. I took so many music theory for guitar with my ukulele. That was interesting. All these classes, right? And I'd hear something in one class and be like, okay. And I hear something in the other class and be like, and then I hear something in another class and be like, and then I hear something in this class and be like, oh, that's this, which is this, which is this. It makes sense. And those aha moments were the coolest feelings in the world. And honestly, they were only cool because of how much difficulty it took to get to that point. Music is like this big circle, and you have to start on some side of it, and it feels like everything's unrelated. But as your understanding grows over here and your understanding grows over here, eventually those points link, and it's just magic because you start to see how things relate. So those little moments, those little victories of, oh, uppercase Roman numeral means major, lowercase means minor, that's the nugget to take away and the nugget to use. Maybe what you got was a little bit more than that. Maybe you got how the major scale works with chords and transposing. Maybe you got it all, whatever it might be. Just, take that nugget, so to speak, move on, and come back to it. See if there's new things that you can sort of unlock. So I don't see any other questions here. I'm just making sure that I didn't miss anything. Looks like I got them all. Cool. I love reading that light bulb moment, Connie. That's the best feeling. And again, this is a very rich, deep concept. There's a lot that's taking place. The Nashville number system is essentially an abbreviation of very complicated music theory concepts. So looks like Pcash says, so if a song has an individual note, you transpose that as well. So yeah, so the Nashville number system really just correlates to what we call the harmony of the song. Harmony is the chords, the background, everything that's taking place in the back. The melody of a song is going to be when you find those individual notes, and you absolutely, can transpose those. It's very rare that the harmony section is just playing one note. It's usually they're playing a chord, which is just three notes played together. So, yeah, it's a lot for sure. And I'm sorry to anybody who feels completely overwhelmed right now by this. We're already at one of the longer live sessions with this. I knew it would be because it's such a rich concept, but just try to, get a little bit as you can. So cool. Zil says, oh, that's helpful. Is the harmony? Yep. So harmony is this is all harmony. And I should have prefaced that to start the lesson. Harmony is going to be everything that's happening in the background. My favorite analogy for this is like a film. When you watch a movie, sometimes you watch a movie for the characters on the screen and it doesn't matter what's going on behind them, right? And that's like a song with a really great melody. It doesn't matter if it's just a little one guitar playing or ukulele or whatever else. That's what the song is about, is the melody. But then there are other movies that are more about the background. You go watch the Godzilla versus King Kong, not for character development, but for big things on screen going nuts, right? Well, that's like harmony, sometimes that can be the focal point of a song. And that's where you get songs that are all about texture and, all of that sort of stuff. And something like the Nashville number system can be more helpful with that type of song because you might want to have more activity with those chords. But I digress. I'm going down a different path right now. Bree says, I love your enthusiasm, all that stuff. It's contagious. Thank you. Beth says, super lesson, maybe a future class on all the sevenths and the diminished chords. That would be great. Connie says, thanks for the quick intro, Matt. You're really great at breaking down things so it's easier to understand. Awesome. Again, this still is a lot of stuff to be broken down, so I hope that you've gotten something out of it. And Pcash says, thank you, Matt. Good stuff. And Sil says, thanks, Matt. Always appreciate it. No, thank you guys for coming and making my life easier by giving me awesome questions. You guys here at Rock Class 101 always have the best core group of people asking questions, and I very much look forward to these every single month. So I will see you guys next month for the next live lesson here on Rock Class 101, where we do them every second Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. Pacific time, whatever that is in your neck of the woods. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you guys next time. And if you have any questions watching this as a recording, feel free to leave them down below. Check it out for this PDF that I made here in class. Thank God my pencil worked. Had some drama with that to start the lesson, but I digress. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Take it easy. Thanks so much. Talk to you later.